Welcome, bienvenidos. I'm Dr. Robin Kelly, she, hers pronouns, the Chief Diversity Officer, and I lead the Office of Inclusive Excellence here at Gonzaga University. Inclusive excellence is a theoretical framework which calls the university to embed diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging into the very fabric of the university, so that these principles are part of everything that we do, so that everyone in our community has an authentic sense of belonging. We are very excited to have Julian Aguon here this afternoon as a distinguished alumni speaker. This is the kickoff event for Zagapalooza Weekend and a continuation of celebrating the 25th anniversary of UMAC, or the Unity Multicultural Education Center. It is important to set the context for our time here together. In the spirit of the Jesuit composition of place, we acknowledge that Gonzaga University is a settler institution residing on the unceded homelands of the Spokane tribe of Indians, the people of the river, a people who have always walked this land. We acknowledge their elders, both past and present, their children, as well as their future generations. Let us pause to consider the historical and continuing impacts of the genocide and colonization, and let us also remember the strength and resilience of the Spokane people, a people who are still here. During this gathering of hearts, minds, and spirits, we humbly ask that we have the courage to recognize the truths of the past and present, and to seek opportunities to create an evolving and maturing justice that brings us into right relationships with and for each other. I want to acknowledge Jesse Monsella, Director of Unity Multicultural Education Center, and the UMAC team. I also want to acknowledge GU's first affinity community, the Alumni of Color community, and Chris Navarro, founding alumni member. I want to acknowledge the many students, staff, faculty, colleagues, and community members. And in particular, I want to acknowledge Carol Hertz and Drew Ryder from the Office of Alumni Relations, who have worked diligently to make this event possible. Lastly, I want to acknowledge Gonzaga's president, President McCullough, for his leadership and continued support for all members of our community. Now, next, I would like to introduce someone very special, Dr. Raymond Reyes. Dr. Reyes is currently the Associate Vice President for Cultural Initiatives in the Office of the President here at Gonzaga. For more than 22 years of his 34 years at Gonzaga University, Dr. Reyes served as Associate Provost and formerly Associate Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer. Alongside his administrative responsibilities, Dr. Reyes has continued to teach courses, consult, and speak at national and international conferences. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Raymond Reyes.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kelly. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. This is a dream come true. You know what John Lennon said, you dream a dream alone, it remains a dream. You dream a dream with other people, it becomes reality. And I love this moment right now. I'm very grateful to be here to celebrate the Unity House Multicultural Education Center 25th anniversary, and more importantly, to welcome my brother, Julian. I want to read an excerpt from an email that I got late last night, because I think it offers some historical context to introducing Julian. This is from Carrie Week. Some of you might know her. She's a colleague in our admissions office and currently on a student recruitment trip in Minnesota. She wrote this to me last night. She says, I want you to know that I'm going to miss seeing Julian when he comes to campus. He's still one of my favorite students, alums. From when I met him long ago in the hallway at Simon Sanchez High School in Guam. He gave me a big hug and he called me Gonzaga. After a few moments of talking with him, I knew he was going to be someone who did important, difficult, and passionate things in life. And I have not been disappointed. Rather, he is so inspirational to me. Tell him, I said, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but in your native language, tell him I said, Hafa Adi. I have 3 of his books, and if he's written more, I'll get them. I really appreciate his poetic passion for the earth and all of humanity. I first met Julian 22 years ago, and I have witnessed him grow like the tree people grow. Our root brothers, they grow, how do they grow? They grow up, reaching towards the sky. They grow out, touching the great surround. And they grow down deep into the earth mother, just like Julian. Julian embodies the notion of who we are today is God's gift to us, and who we become is our gift to God. Painted on the wall, and many of you know this, in the southwest corner hallway of College Hall, there's a quote from Father Kalvenbach, the former Superior General of the Society of Jesus. Julian incarnates these words, and I quote, "The true measure of a Jesuit education is who our students become." Listen to who Julian has become and is becoming. He's a human rights lawyer and founder of Blue Ocean Law, a progressive firm that works at the intersection of indigenous rights and environmental justice. His new book, No Country for 8-Spot Butterflies, was published by Astra House, September 2022. Julian's Atlantic, this is cool, his Atlantic essay entitled To Hell with Drowning was a 2022 Pulitzer Prize finalist in commentary. He lives in the village of Yunay in Guam. Please join me now in welcoming a member of the class of 2004, just like Sting and Madonna and all these other people that don't, Prince. I'm just going to say, here is Julian.
In Guam, even the dead are dying. As I write this, the U.S. Department of Defense is ramping up the militarization of my homeland, part of its $8 billion scheme to relocate roughly 5,000 Marines from Okinawa to Guam. In fact, ground has already been broken along the island's beautiful northern coastline for a massive firing range complex. The complex, consisting of 5 live fire training ranges and support facilities, is being built dangerously close to the island's primary source of drinking water, the northern Guamlands aquifer. Moreover, the complex is situated over several historically and culturally significant sites, including the remnants of ancient villages, several thousands of years old, where our ancestors' remains remain. The construction of these firing ranges will entail the destruction of more than 1,000 acres of native limestone forests. These forests are unbearably beautiful, took millennia to evolve, and today function as essential habitat for several endangered endemic species, including a fruit bat, a flightless rail, and three species of tree snails, not to mention a swiftlet, a starling, and a slender-toed gecko. The largest of the 5 ranges, a 59-acre multi-purpose machine gun range, will be built a mere 100 feet from the last remaining reproductive Hudson Lagu tree in Guam. If only superpowers were concerned with the stuff of lowercase earth, like forests and fresh water. If only they were curious about the whisper and scurry of small lives. If only they were moved by beauty. If only. But the militarization of Guam is nothing if not proof that they are not so moved. In fact, the military buildup now underway is happening over the objections of thousands of the island's residents. Many of these protesters, including myself, are indigenous Chamorros whose ancestors endured 5 centuries of colonization and who see this most recent wave of unilateral action by the United States simply as the latest course in a long and steady diet of dispossession. When the US Navy first released its highly technical and 11,000-page long draft environmental impact statement in November 2009, the people of Guam submitted over 10,000 comments outlining our concerns, many of us strenuously opposed to the military's plans. We produced simplified educational materials on the anticipated adverse impacts of those plans and provided community trainings on them. We took hundreds of people hiking through the jungles specifically slated for destruction. We took several others swimming in the harbor, where the military also proposed dredging some 40 acres of coral reef for the berthing of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. We testified so many times and in so many ways in the streets and in the offices of elected officials. We even filed lawsuits under the National Environmental Policy Act, effectively forcing the Navy to conduct further environmental impact statements, thus pushing the buildup back a few years. But delay was all we won, and the bulldozers are back with a vengeance. A $78 million contract for the live fire training range complex has already been awarded to Black Construction, which has already begun clearing 89 acres of primary limestone forest and 110 acres of secondary forest. It's bitterly ironic that so many of these machines bear the name Caterpillar, when the very thing they are destroying is that precious creature's preciously singular habitat. To be sure, such forests house the host plants for the endemic Mariana 8-spot butterfly. But then again, maybe a country that routinely prefers power over strength and living over letting live is no country for 8-spot butterflies. While this wave of militarization should elicit our every outrage, indignation is not nearly enough to build a bridge to anywhere. It's useful, yes, but we need to get a hell of a lot more serious about articulating alternatives if we hope ultimately to replace its ethos of extraction with one of our own. In the case of my own people, an ethos of reciprocity. And nowhere is that ethos more alive than in those very same forests. For it is there our Zo'amti, our healers, are perpetuating our culture, in particular, our traditional healing practices. It is there on the forest floor and in the crevices of the limestone rock that many of the plants needed to make our medicine grow. It is there that our medicine women gather the plants their mothers and their mothers' mothers gathered before them. These plants, combined with others harvested from elsewhere on the island, treat everything from anxiety to arthritis. As someone who suffers from regular bouts of bronchitis, I can attest to the fact that the medicine Anti-Francis Areola Cabrera Meno makes to treat respiratory problems has proven more effective in my case than any medicine of the modern world. Yet Anti-Francis, like so many other Zoomti I know, takes no credit for the cure. As she tells it, to do so would be hubris, as so many others are involved in the healing process. The plants themselves, with whom she converses in a secret language. Her mother, who taught her how to identify which plants have which properties and when to gather them, and the ancestors who give her permission to enter the jungle and who, on occasion, favor her, allowing her to find everything she needs and more. More than this, she tells me that I too am part of that process. That people like me who seek out her services give her life meaning. That she wouldn't know what to do with herself if she wasn't making medicine. That the life of a healer was always hers to have because she was born breech under a new moon, and thus had the hands for healing. But such things are inevitably lost in translation, and no military on earth is sensitive enough to perceive something as soft as the whisper of another worldview. Earlier this month, I received an invitation to serve on the Global Advisory Council for Progressive International, a new and exciting global initiative to mobilize people around the world behind a shared vision of social justice. So, of course, I said yes. Truth be told, I know little by way of details. What kind of time commitment are we talking about? How will we work as a group? Who else said yes? But I am ready anyway. Ready to build a global justice movement that is anchored, at least in part, in the intellectual contributions of Indigenous peoples. Peoples who have a unique capacity to resist despair through connection to collective memory, and who just might be our best hope to build a new world rooted in reciprocity and mutual respect for the earth and for each other. The world we need, the world of our dreams, the same world who, on a quiet day in September, bent down low and breathed in the ear of Arundhati Roy. She is still on her way. Thank you. I wanted to start by getting right into it. Raymond, here, you can have this one. Oh, do you have one? Oh, wow, I shouldn't have taken that one. Hello, half a day. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to President McCullough. Thank you so much to the Gonzaga Alumni Office, to Cara, Bob, Drew, everyone else who sort of, brought all of their collective energy and their sheer willpower together and brought me here. I feel very, very blessed to be here. This school is, and the grounds that we're on, this place is very, very special to me because I formed the friendships that, would become lifelong friendships. Many of you are here tonight. So thank you all for being part of this. And I wanted to just start by explaining why I've chosen to construct this lecture away from the traditional lecture, because it's conversations. It is conversations that formed me, and it is conversations that happened here, right here. Conversations that happened long into the night at the Unity House, which apparently now goes by a new name. And we have all the staff, thank you so much for being here. But Unity House and my friendships, all my friendships here, all the conversations that made me who I am, happened here. And I wanted this night and this lecture to be more special than that. I really wanted it to be a conversation. And of course, I'm very, very lucky to have such a good conversation partner. You should all know that I'm just coming off a 6-week national book tour for this book. We had the launch. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, so it's been an incredible 6 weeks, a long 6 weeks. I had my book launch on September 15th with V. She used to go by the name Eve Ensler. We had the launch at the Berkeley Museum. After that, I was in Washington, D.C. at Politics and Prose bookstore with the science writer from The Atlantic. His name was Ed Yong, incredible writer. Then after that, we were in Boston, and then City Lights. It's just been a whirlwind, Powell's, and ultimately Hawaii, and then here. But I really wanted Raymond to be my last conversation partner precisely because Raymond Reyes, Dr. Reyes, is the very first speech I ever heard. I was 17 years old and stepped on this campus, which was largely foreign to me at the time. It was just a strange new world, and little did I know at that moment that my world would get so much bigger. But he started it all. I was in an audience maybe roughly this size, for incoming freshmen, and he said, being here for the next 4 years, being in college, at this college, is going to be a little bit like being at the customs border. And I was like, wait, where is he going with this? But he made it clear, and then his thesis would be proved true throughout the next 4 years. He said, the questions that really matter, at the end of the day, you're gonna take a lot of amazing classes from a lot of amazing professors. You're gonna have amazing conversations, but the questions that you're gonna come with and the questions that you're gonna leave with are these. They're 3. You probably have no idea about the speech you gave 20 years ago, but I'm just repeating it for you, so maybe it's deja vu for you. He said, the questions you will be asked at this institution are, who are you? Where are you coming from? And where are you going? That is the gestalt of the educational experience that is being here. And I have carried with me essentially those 3 questions for the rest of my life. I do it every day as a professional human rights lawyer, and now more recently as a writer. And those are questions that swim to the top of every sea that I swim in, every new environment, everything. I have those 3 questions, and they repeat like a refrain, like a beautiful song. And it's just an honor to be here tonight in this place with you and with you. So thank you so much, all, for being here. And so we're going to get into it. We're going to have, hopefully, a rich, authentic conversation. I asked him to not give me any advance notice of any of the questions, precisely because I want it to be a real experience between us, but also with all of you. And this is really the kinds of conversations that I had here, and I hope you all, as students, are having here. These conversations will make you who you are. So let's hit it.
Okay, so thank you. I remember vividly when you were 18, when you came, at Unity House, that's now an open field across from this building. And I distinctly remember, and Cease, where are you, Cease? There you are. There's a couple of students here, alum, that were part of that, where we ended up coming up with this idea of courageous conversations create caring communities. And I always remember learning that from you, from the students. So let's get right down to it, okay?
Okay.
All right. So recently I was reading something that Oscar Wilde wrote, and he said that without order, nothing exists. Without chaos, nothing evolves. Your work many times is doing that drunk walk between order and chaos, between established status quo, take it for granted reality, versus innovation and the evolution of thought through different cultural epistemologies that you earlier claimed. How do you reconcile that tension, or do you? Is it necessary to?
No.
The issues around chaos and order.
Yeah, maybe let me get at that question through sort of like a slightly different route. I think what I've been trying to do, I think my enterprise, my project, be it literary or legal, has sort of been this. I'm not interested in sacrificing the larger confusion for the smaller certainty. I'm not. I do have questions. Some of those questions are big. And what I'm trying to do with my career in seeking to provide maximal legal protection for Indigenous peoples, many of whom I worked with throughout Oceania or the Pacific region, or what I'm doing in this book, I'm not actually necessarily answering a question. I'm just enlarging the question. I'm widening it. I'm worrying the edges of our sort of political and moral imaginations. I think that's the kind of writing that's ultimately helpful to other people. It's helpful to people who are on a journey, and it's helpful to people who are genuinely curious. And I think that's what we do. We slam a door sometimes on questions that are a little bit, whose answer is too cavernous, it's too big. And I think honestly, that's part of the problem. I mean, that's part of what we are facing now. With the sheer scale, for example, of the crisis that we now face, I would argue that climate change is the defining challenge of our time. Something about that conversation, it's so big. I mean, it's like the enormity of it feels impenetrable. I think a lot of people who are having conversations about solutions to the climate crisis are sort of, in some ways, even young people I see walk prematurely away from the problem, either because of grief, or appear to be cynical about the problem. But the thing that I'm interested in, I also think that cynicism itself is a form of grief, but I think it's a lazy form of grief. I think hope is hard. But I like the way certain writers, for example, I was in City Lights most recently with Rebecca Solnit, a really amazing progressive feminist writer. And we had a 2-hour conversation after the formal event. We had dinner at this amazing Chinese restaurant. It was amazing. But the conversation was so amazing because I realized why her writing, why her thinking on hope is so persuasive to me, because she doesn't disaggregate it from uncertainty. She says both optimism and pessimism, they both actually suffer from the same exact thing, and that is this idea that the future is already predetermined. The only thing we know about the future is it's not settled. And that at every moment, our actions or inactions determine, these chains of events, they determine. But that is what's certain, the uncertainty. And if you know that, there's room to act there. That's what I'm trying to do with the writing and the law. I'm trying to point out to other people and people I'm in community with that in the end, ultimately, it's a remarkable thing to be alive in a moment that matters this much. I think feminists are always telling us that. That's what the book, All We Can Save, a recent book, is just about that. And I think that is the kind of conversation that I want to have.
I'm smiling because I'm thinking to myself, you're embodying hope right now. And that's magical. It reminds me in the book, I think it's More Right, that chapter with your Aunt Lou, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I want to read well, she tells you that it's easier for Indigenous people to believe in magic than it is for other people. And in the chapter, she says this you say this, because eyes wide open with wonder is perfectly good definition of magic. Right now in your life, what makes your eyes wide open with wonder? I wonder, in the here and now, where does your hope within that uncertainty reside?
Thank you for that question. I think two things. It resides in other people, more specifically. It lives in community. I think I feel most hopeful when I'm sort of on the ground building something. Not because it's not enough to criticize, with the current the world and what I do in my day job is a lot of that. It's criticizing, and I'm my profession as a lawyer. I'm locked all day into an adversarial sort of worldview. It's A versus B. That V matters. Every lawsuit, it's two parties and we're in locked opposition. But something about writing is so different, writing this book. And I guess Arundhati Roy would say it this way in terms of some of the work you do in terms of as a lawyer, as a writer, is you are interested in cultivating the cold precision of an assassin's bullet. That's what I heard her say in a recent interview. I was like, wow, that really is the law. But writing writing this kind of book, it's the aim, the project, the work is so thoroughly different. It is writing in order to build a fire with the goal of warming up as many bodies as possible. It's radically loving. That's what makes writing feel so special, and that's why I feel buoyed by that. But also by beauty. I think this is the thing that I want to say the most. I mean, what allows me to feel this way, is that I have an unusually capacious ability to be moved by beauty. I think to be felled by beauty. It's about awe and wonder, and that's partly why I included some of these pieces in the book, like More Right or Go with the Moon. I'm giving pride of place to a very young point of view, to a child's point of view, because I have interspersed with political commentary. I have lots of these childhood vignettes about like playing on a beach as a child, which is a it's called forum sands, foraminifera. There are these tiny little single-celled creatures whose exoskeletons wash ashore when they die. That's what they're called, forum sands. But to a child, it's just a blanket of stars. So I was like, we cartwheeled over constellations, and I tried to do that in the book. I remembered, and I wrote this during COVID, at the height of the pandemic when I was processing my grief. The writing primarily was about processing my grief, and then it became something so much bigger, and I started recalling all of these powerful moments as a Chamorro person coming of age on this beautiful island that is unlike anywhere else, and writing about sort of those experiences and really celebrating that and realizing that that is who I really am at the end. I might be defined by my profession, like being a lawyer or a writer, but truly I am just a person attempting to bear witness. And I'm a person who is felled by beauty. Those are the things, I would say that those are my truest and most enduring impulses. And I'm sort of happy that I found a publisher who allowed me to write this kind of book that is sort of chaos. It is a lovely mess, because it doesn't adhere to one structure.
Okay, here's what I liked about your book, and I used it for a class last semester that I taught, by the way.
When it was Perpetual Light?
Yes, yeah. In fact, this is the copy of the book here, and it's riddled with all kinds of comments and highlights and all of that, because it was my way of having a conversation with you that is now happening in real time, so I love it. Okay, so this is something that came up from the students when they read the book for the class I taught. And I'm paraphrasing, but to the effect of talking about traditional indigenous knowledge can and does inform acts of environmental justice. What are ways to avoid the slippery slope of romanticizing indigeneity, Rousseau's depiction of the noble savage, the magical native, cultural appropriation? Reflections on that?
No, I love that question. I appreciate it. Basically, we have this conversation too in Guam, among the activists, and there's that tension, the intergenerational tension, because on the one hand, we are people for whom respect is such a sort of quintessential value, especially respect for elders. But then sometimes our elders will come in the room and really sort of disempower some of the young people. Because they're so I guess precisely because there's this notion from the top, I would say that the old way is always better, or I think it's a cheap conversation. I think it's wildly insufficient. What I really believe is that we have to bring the best, from our sort of cultural practices, from our protocols, from our indigenous wisdom. And the reason why it's so successful is because it's not romantic. It's because it's actually scientific, for lack of a better word. It's tried and true. That's why indigenous peoples have part of the answer to the question about how to get out of the mess that we're in. Because indigenous peoples have imaginations that predate all of these prevailing economic and global political systems and ways of thinking. Our life ways, these are tried and true. These are the original words for sustainability. For example, but they're rooted in care. But another thing that I want to point out, sorry, my answers I realize are all long. So I apologize for that, but I'm also a passionate person, so I feel like I'm going to really go there. So the thing that I learned is that I tried to return to the root of things. For example, as an indigenous Chamorro, who's struggling with some of that intergenerational sort of miscommunication, is that I realized my people, we have two words for old people. One is amku, which means old. The implication, old and not wise. Then we have another word, Saina, which means old and wise. So we actually were smart enough at all times in our history to know that some people get old and never get wise. And we should not listen to those people. That is important too, and that's not romantic at all. It's useful. It's incredibly practical to know when you're in the presence of an elder. And the way I know, I can only rely on my intuition. You intuitively know when you're in the presence of an elder. Someone who manages to convey all of this useful information about how to be human on the planet, but does so in a loving way, in a way that makes space for you and others, and in a way that ultimately doesn't empower the young. And I'm lucky enough to have elders like that in my life.
No, please. So I think you were referencing the Cree poet Billy Ray Belcourt in his collection of essays entitled "The Wound is the World." And he wrote, quote, "We're also able to engage the problems of the world, indigeneity, indigenous knowledge. We're also able to engage the problems of the world without losing clarity about the futures we need to build." It's almost this creative tension, I think, that the Jesuits talk about in terms of it's in the tension that God's face is revealed. So how do you reconcile the balance between the ideal and the real? When we're the idea of focusing on the problems, looking at the dark night of soul, looking at rewriting Book of Job or whatever it is, but at the same time having aspiration, having hope. It's a different approach.
I think it's a both and kind of answer to that. What I really mean is that I believe that we always have to keep one foot in the other world. The world we are hastening toward, the world we want to build, the world of our dreams, the same world I talked about here. I have to see it. It's like an ideological North Star, if anything else, because we can't only be in the business of critiquing the world, the current systems, the current models, and we have to build together this other thing, because it's like, what am I going to sit here and say, this is the failings of predatory global capitalism? That's fine and good. It's barely useful now because it's just cerebral. It's just discourse. But if we're not building, so that's partly why I'm sort of doing a little bit more creative work now in my life. I just turned 40 this year. I watched Golden Girls and ate fried chicken. It was a very good time. That is what I did to celebrate. All right. And it was incredible. And it's been an incredible year because I really see, basically it's like that one sort of, what is it, the adage, the old phrase, if you're doing your work, the work that you're meant to do in the world, if you're bringing forth your sort of gifts, bringing them forward, then the universe sort of conspires in your favor. I forget, that's a general idea, right? This year feels like one hell of a confirmation of that principle, like a validation of that. I feel like all these signs from the universe, have just been showing up, saying that, confirming that I have to do more creative work. I can't only be doing litigation, for example, and that's how I sort of, it's the same answer. It's the same answer to the other question about the hopefulness. On the one hand, I recently sued Fish and Wildlife for violations of Section 7 and Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act. And we recently won a great lawsuit where critical habitat was designated for 23 species. That's exceedingly concrete work. No, but I bring it up only because I couldn't actually access hope. I couldn't if I wasn't doing exceedingly concrete work in the world. That's the big difference. We think we can just all have it up here in our head. There is nothing there for you. If you live only here, there is nothing there for you. There's no future of abundance. That is what we need to do. And that's partly what I'm trying to do with young people I work with in the climate space. So we are also lead counsel to the Republic of Vanuatu, which is a country in the Pacific Ocean that is currently pursuing an advisory opinion on climate change, particularly the nexus between climate change and human rights from the International Court of Justice. And it's an opinion, if favorable, that could have just global ramifications. It's incredible work, and I'm proud of it, but it's still not enough. It's not enough. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned law, and there's probably a few lawyers in the audience, so I'm going to go with this. I'm going to risk, because this might be a little bit dense, but okay. So, and it's more of my curiosity. No, well,
Let's not bore everybody.
Okay, it's not, no. We won't hear snoring, but
Okay.
You served as a lead litigator in the Davis versus Guam case for nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
What still lingers as a major lesson learned? And I shared this with you before. I was fascinated by the tension between this idea of the arguments around ancestry equivalent to race.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get technical right now, but I think you could, we talked about this
okay, I'm
before.
I'll
But
try to do the best job I
yeah,
can. It's a very complicated sort of set of legal issues that basically involve sort of the U.S. federal courts, especially SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, and it's sort of like evolving jurisprudence around race. What's happened is like a massive and sort of pronounced like flattening of race, where like it's ahistorical, it has no sense of like, for example, even the original intention of these Reconstruction amendments. I mean, like they're being deployed now, essentially, in brief. These amendments are like, 14, 15, they're being deployed in service of people who historically were never in need of its protection. So it's very tricky. But now, in the wake of a very important Supreme Court decision in 2000, that case is Rice versus Cayetano, where a plaintiff challenged a statutory scheme, a state law, that allowed benefits for Native Hawaiians, which is part of a larger restorative justice initiative, and the court invalidated it and struck it down under the 15th Amendment in particular, but there was a lot of discussion in there about how any time a state legislator attempts to extend benefits along ancestral lines or employs an ancestral classification, it's illegal race discrimination. So it's a conflation of race and ancestry. It's a pretending that they're always the same. But actually, the Supreme Court, its true language said ancestry can be a proxy for race. So Davis versus Guam, which was a 10-year litigation, was essentially my attempt to disentangle those concepts and say race, when the US Supreme Court says ancestry can be a proxy for race, the actual inference is that sometimes it is not a proxy for race. Because otherwise it would have said what it wanted to say, which was ancestry is race. A is B is not A can be B. They're very different. So what we did is we litigated, ultimately it was a loss. It went up to the Supreme Court, and I litigated the hell out of it at the Ninth Circuit level. No, but the thing that I realized at the Ninth Circuit level, I had a job to do. Once I realized like it's possible we can lose, like in terms of this, on the specific facts of this case, it might be possible. But what I was going to do was try to do such a good job in the briefs and in oral arguments to actually disentangle those concepts for every indigenous peoples thereafter. So I can honestly report, despite losing in terms of narrow legal outcome, it was a win. Yes. It was a win because that case now, Davis versus Guam, interestingly enough, now stands for the proposition that ancestry, there are many different scenarios where ancestry is not a racial categorization. So we saved all of these, in effect, Native Hawaiian programs, Native and Alaskan programs. So when in oral argument, I was very aware, like 7 minutes in, I was like, oh, I have a job to do. And that job is solidarity. It's not winning this particular case, or it's both and. It's both trying to win it, but trying to win a larger war, and that is on behalf of every Native peoples who may or may not attempt to provide a benefit or some sort of protection for the group, for the Native group. And if I can do that, that's still a success for every other Native group in America. And so that was written. It is now a decision, and people are using it in that way. So we're very happy.
Yeah, oh man. I'm glad I asked that question. Isn't his luminosity beautiful?
Oh, God.
Yes. So, okay, I want to ask you. I love Audre Lorde.
Oh, me too.
And you mentioned her. Yeah, in your book. For those of you who aren't familiar with her work, she's an African-American womanist. Is there such a thing as a radical feminist? Who gets to define that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Don't ask me.
Because in your book, you.
Yeah.
Well,
there are so many people in the audience who can answer that question.
Okay, so
no, but,
I won't go there. But okay.
No, but truthfully, I think you could argue that it's possibly even redundant.
Yeah, well,
because feminism is radical.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, anyway, where I'm going with, I think I'm going with this is.
Yes. Oh, where's Drew? Drew.
Oh, no, I don't know where Drew. Yeah, because we're going to open. Okay, so. What does Audre Lorde have to teach regarding indigenous rights and environmental justice work?
Oh.
You know, I mean, that's kind of intuitively obvious, but
Well, it's so much, you know. I mean, first of all, she's such a formidable thinker. You know, she made like gargantuan contributions to feminism, but also to the cause of racial justice, like multiple. I mean, and she was like a living, breathing embodiment of intersectionality, first of all. That's the first point. I feel like I'm at like a slam poetry. I should start snapping my fingers, because I'm just like, there's certain writers for whom, I have such the highest respect that I'm just gonna whatever, there's so much work. But honestly, her insight that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's home is incredibly useful. Do you know why? It allows you to apportion your energy appropriately. Political energy is a finite resource. Yeah. We don't have enough energy to try to tackle everything all the time, all at once, We don't. So if we're gonna be in and it helps us clarify where we're going to get what thing. For example, if I want like true reparations and justice, I don't actually believe that I'm gonna get it from like just a court of law. Many times, even because the way different doctrines develop over time, especially constitutional legal doctrines, they arrive at various historical moments and they've been put toward various ends. But I know better than to think that everything is going to come, from this a favorable, court judgment. So I use it, but I'm so aware of its limitations. I use the law as masterfully as I can, while being simultaneously aware of its severe shortcomings. That is how we should treat every profession, because every profession should be a spatula. It's like it's only a tool. Everything is only a tool to be manipulated, to be used, to ultimately be helpful to human communities. And other than human relatives. But that is what it's about. I don't actually have reverence. And I'm also a part-time law professor for the past decade, but when I do it, I always try to frame it in such a way that the law is an implement, it's a tool. And I use that spatula example because sometimes, when you make an omelet, sometimes you just have to be super visual about it. Because I was like, if you can detach it, if we know that the law, like many other things, is always already a moving train, we know that we don't necessarily or can't be neutral. Because Howard Zinn, the great historian, said that you cannot be neutral on a moving train. And these are useful insights. So I try to call upon all of these elders in the book.
Okay. So I want you to elaborate on something. We know about the traditional 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But you've talked when I've heard you speak, as well as read what you've written, this idea of reciprocity and respect. Fuels, nourishes, nurtures resilience. We talk about tribal people and these challenges and the dark side of human nature that has to be addressed. So where's the synergies, what's the relationship between this notion of reciprocity and respect and how it does indeed nourish or nurture cultural resilience? Does that make sense?
It does, but I feel like the question is too big.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay, I'll do another one.
Yeah.
You want to do another one?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about beauty. You want to talk about beauty?
I can talk about beauty.
Okay, we'll talk about beauty. Okay, we'll talk about beauty. How about this? So Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, during that period of time, we'll just go there for a while.
Okay, that's quite a while.
So just to make a point about how the original academies were where in botanical gardens. So there was this kind of interesting connected dots between pursuit of truth, right?
Yeah.
But having to be surrounded by beauty.
Yeah, that was such a big thing. Right? Yeah, even Aquinas.
Okay, so talk a little bit about beauty.
Well, I think there's some philosophy professors. Don't kill me with this. I don't really know, but I seem to recall Aquinas in particular, this notion that truth equals beauty equals goodness. I don't know. That's a paraphrase. I don't think that's exactly what's there. But I think maybe I'm playing with an indigenous version of that. But honestly, I think they're just so coupled. I think, for example, even the cause, working for social justice, I just have never decoupled it from sort of appreciation of beauty. I think beauty just matters so much. I think, it's imperative to the broader political movement for collective liberation. And I do. I don't think it's negotiable at all. Again, Rebecca's only just because she's just so fresh, because we just talked. That was sort of her thesis behind Orwell's Roses, who was largely celebrated as the most austere, stern, anti-fascist, anti-sort of totalitarianism scholar, writer, right? Did all of but also he spent all of these years planting rose gardens. He actually spent so much of his energy, toward physical labor, to watching things grow, to planting them, cultivating beauty. And she was like, that is, and also there's like the whole labor, the whole movement, feminist movement, bread and roses. You need the latter too, and it's also biblical. Man cannot live on bread alone. There are so many connections. It's rich, fertile soil, but if you study, whether it's theology or philosophy or all of the, I think so many people keep rounding back. They just keep coming back to this notion that we need bread. We need the stuff, like we need food, shelter, housing. We need all of those things. But we also need the roses. We need culture, beauty, collectivity. We need a private life. This is back to a room of one's own. This whole, we need that. And we need that interior life. And so we see Winston, the character, in 1984, Orwell's most famous work, actually having, rebelling against the big brother and the regime, actually by these tiny little moments, this insistence on beauty at all costs, and the insistence on the private life, the interior life, one's own thoughts. We need both. And I think that's what I'm interested in doing for myself and for my community. If we can insist on both, we can point to a culture of abundance. And I think that's missing now in a lot, for example, of the climate change discourse. I think we're so good at, it's just not yet. We haven't made the logistical shift. We haven't managed to convince people that a future constructed away from fossil fuels is a future of abundance. They think it's only about letting go of something, giving up, this relinquishing, but no, it's really about this other thing, where we don't have to buy our way out of it. The abundance of there's a beautiful essay in The Guardian about a violin, and calling it a truce with the trees. And they said in some ways, because a violin is made from all of these natural materials, the hairs from animals, it's made from woods, it's made 99%, all of these things, but it's this violin that's been around for longer. It's a violin older than this entire country. It's just such an old violin. But I forget who wrote it, I just had it. But basically this idea that a violin is a tiny carbon sink, in a way, if you think about it. But it's also, a beautiful thing that sort of stayed back. It's like the use of carbon. I'm messing this up. But essentially it stayed back and sang. And I was like, so every single artist and creative working toward cultivating the vocabulary around abundance is an ally of mine. That is what I think the project is, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to open up the
yes,
world
sure.
a little bit, okay?
I think we're at
so
that point.
Audience, those of you in the audience who have ever been to Guam, raise your hand.
Okay.
Okay,
12
not very many. Okay, thank you. So Julian, what do you want people in this room who have not been to Guam, what do you want them to know about Guam? I mean, it's a whole lot. I know that. It's the Atlantic Ocean, but can you kind of distill it down to those
Pacific
in the audience
Ocean,
who
yeah.
haven't been to Guam? What's essential to know about Guam?
It's the homeland of the Chamorro people. It's really, really small. If you think about it, it's 30 miles long and 10 to 12 miles wide. It's a tiny speck of land, but a beautiful culture lives there, and thrives there, and has sort of basically been there for 4,000 years. I mean, and it's just a special place. So many of our places are special, And I think that's what I would like people to know about it, that it's not just a place where the US military bases just keep expanding. It started with 1, 2, 3, and now this marine. It's just a constant, expansion of the US military footprint, but it's also all these other things. It's also this incredibly beautiful place that's special and that's worth saving, Yeah.
All right. So this is a term from the 60s, but I hate to bogart this whole conversation. I think that I'd like to see
Yeah, I think we have about 11 minutes for questions. 11 or
Do you
12.
have anybody in the audience? There's, if you don't want to speak, there's pieces of paper you can frame a question and then we can get it out. We have 2 microphones, a roving microphone in the back.
Oh,
and
wow.
also this one in front.
Surprising nobody. Julian, so Dr. Reyes brought up one of your favorite Audre Lorde quotes.
Yeah.
But I have a question from somebody because I knew you when you were a student here.
Wow. Yeah.
And one of my favorite Audre Lorde quotes, is your silence will not protect you. And so I'm wondering, do you have any advice for the students here, especially the students of color, the Indigenous students, the queer students, the trans students, about silence and speaking?
No, that's a great question. Thank you so much, Krista. No, and it's crazy to see some of you here in the audience. We, in some ways, our activism really was a response to some of the things that we saw happening, on campus. But basically, I agree that that quote is so powerful. And so it's always timely, because it's always true. Your silence will not protect you. So the first thing that I would say is that I was fortunate enough to find my people early on in my experience. And I really mean my people, and most of whom we met through the Unity House, some of them through Castle. I mean, there was like different things that were going on, peace and justice, what was the other, peer, the group peer, all of these other student groups, but basically, Hero, finding your people early, it's just very, very important. And we don't have to agree on everything. God knows that's not what we're looking for, like gross uniformity or sort of vulgar, just sameness. That's not where I respect a diversity of opinion. Some of, including people who disagree with me, but finding the people that you could really lean on, especially in your, private moment, finding those people, building community, is so, so, so important. But I think the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it's easier to speak up when you have a community, when you have people to lean on. Like if I didn't have a community, I probably wouldn't have spoken up the few times that I did in my 4 years here, And I think it's just very important. So find your people, and there are, the first place, if you have no idea what that looks like, the first place I suggest is checking out Unity House, which now goes by UMAC. What is it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Unity Multicultural.
Yes, Unity Multicultural Education Center, UMEC.
Yes.
And it's located in this building. That's a great first
Right
place
down
to
the
start.
hallway, yeah.
It's a great first place to
Yeah,
start,
that's right,
yeah.
Are there other, got a question? Please.
You may have just addressed some of this. Sorry, my name is Stephanie. It's my second year here, and I'm a student of color, so woohoo! So my question comes from a student of color's perspective. Gonzaga has definitely improved in the past years in many areas of diversity, but I'm curious, you did touch on this, how did you find your community at Gonzaga, especially because Gonzaga is a predominantly white institution?
Yeah. Again, it was really through the Unity House, and it was through these first set of clubs that I joined, and I think, we have a gravitational pull, even if we don't really think so. We're all echolocating. I just feel the clicks, and I think we know that. And I think we have to trust our intuition. I think you're not taught to trust your intuition enough. I think people just are not taught to trust their intuition enough, and it is so informative. If I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have two things, my intuition and my relationships. So I think that's a really big thing. And I think you find them once you realize that, I don't know if this is helpful, but I think I hope it is. When you are a relational person, meaning you see the world in a relational sense, as opposed to a transactional ones, those friendships, they last a lifetime. They're so rich, but they're wellspring, They're the well that has the water that you really, really need, And if you can do that, I just think that's just super important. But also just, realizing that, in some ways, there are no silos anymore. It's not like these issues are, not connected. It's not even just about race. It's also about class, and it's also about gender, and it's also realizing that, our world, it also includes everybody, including white people. Just to be very frank, that is, in the end, we are trying to cultivate a profound respect for difference. Yeah. But we are also striving to togetherness. Togetherness is a bountiful place. I am actually not trying to stretch the canopy. My life's work is trying to protect indigenous peoples, yes, but it's also really about stretching the we. I want a cavernous we. I really want us all to get there together. That is how we do it. We do it, and we respect difference, but we make sure that we have safe spaces in which to exercise certain things, but also realizing that we are in this together. Climate change, if anything, has destroyed every last bit, of those silos, and now we have 8 years left. We are an unforgiving timeline. If we don't, Arundhati Roy recently said, and she wrote it in the introduction, she said, sometimes she imagines us, the human race, all packed into a public bus that is hurtling off the edge of a cliff, and all we can do is bicker over which songs to sing on the way down. That is a terrifying proposition, yet it's happening. It is absolutely happening. So we also, God, this is a crazy long answer too, and I swear I'm almost done, but also realizing that your energy is limited. Like, I wish older people told me that when I was young, that your energy, including your political energy, it's a finite resource. There's not enough to go around endlessly. You have to find a way, to navigate that. Yeah, thank you.
Uniformity without conformity. Yep. Another one. Raise the collective IQ at the moment. Come on. Question me and answer.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
The microphone right here.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. Sophia and my name's Jack. We had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Reyes on Monday, and he had nothing but the nicest praise and everything about you and your work here. And he specifically brought up the And We Stage video. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on that and its significance to you.
Thank you for the question. No, I just wanted to avoid saying those 3 words on this stage. No, just because it was such a big part, it ended up being a big part of our lives here. Basically, me and a few friends got together and we engaged in the project of truth-telling. We told the truth about some of our sort of experiences, the racialized experiences on campus, and some other issues. But we just talked about that candidly. And I guess it was a little bit, at the time, it just felt like a documentary at the time, but then it quickly felt revolutionary because so many people were using classes and using it to crack open bigger community and campus conversations about those issues. And I'm so glad we did it in the end. I'm so happy that me and my friends did this video because we found out later that it helped so many other students. It helped a lot of students, and that in the end,
It did.
I don't know, in the end, we are just, all here to be of use. Maybe that's really at bottom what this Jesuit education is or should be, how to be someone for and with others. That is the gist of this education. If we're not getting that, we are leaving here like undernourished, But this place has the capacity to nourish us because it's, at least in theory, it's guided by these values. And it's like a charter. These are the principles that this education is supposed to be sort of tailored after, built after. Yes, there are shortcomings, but we keep so what I urge you to do is keep pushing this place to be better at all times. Push it, push it, push it. You have to push it because there's no other choice. Because you're also you are in charge of your section of the relay. You are responsible for your time here. Yeah. So make it better than when you came.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess 2 more questions. One from...
What were the geopolitical influences that caused the U.S. Military to move into Guam from, was it Okinawa?
Yeah, sure.
Okinawa,
Given what's going on in Europe between Ukraine and Russia. I mean, is there a similar type of threat in that part of Asia?
That's the full question, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Basically, yes, it's a longer standing issue. I mean, basically, this is all of this buildup principally grows out of a concern for China's rising influence in the Asia-Pacific theater. I mean, this is clear from the Quadrennial Defense Review, from all of the reports. I mean, all of the think tanks, everything. The U.S. is really gravely concerned, and actually has recently started calling China its biggest pacing challenge, and that is why. I mean, that is why. Well, that's one of the principal reasons why that the U.S. is expanding. But part of the critique of what's happening is it's happening without sufficient community consultation. It's definitely happening without the the exercise of the right of free, prior, and informed consent. These are sort of like a lot of the community's opposition is rooted in those facts. You know, because some of the people on Guam are very patriotic. Some of the people actually are fine with an increased military presence. They're not fine with the fact that it was being done completely without consultation and being done, these decisions, just to remind you, maybe you need everyone needs a bigger geopolitical context. All of the decisions, you know, being made at the congressional level, they are, in fact, being made by people we cannot vote for. The US has a colonies problem. Yes. It still has colonies. Guam is one of them. Yep. So that is something that we should foreground, you know, that I'm part of a decolonization movement. We have a right to throw off the colonial yoke, including a right to independence. Right. And we have been blocked from exercising that, and it's problematic. But that's part of it. Thank you. One of you? Want the last question? I think we have time for one more. No? Yes.
Noel Cave, class of 71. It startles me to think that 70 years ago I was a child on the island of Guam. So the Guam that I saw is just a memory from what you're telling me now too. But my question is a more practical thing. What do we contribute to, money-wise, to help your cause?
Oh, wow. That's a question I never get.
That's wow. That's good.
I have no idea. Maybe I'll talk to you after, but I don't no. I'm usually turning away money in some ways because I'm like not a nonprofit. Oh, you can buy the book. How about that? And if you don't want, again, if you're feeling exceptionally generous, you can buy multiple copies of the book.
Yes, yes. For a book discussion, it's a great book.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the wrap up. This is the official wrap up. Please stay a few minutes. Sorry, Dr. Kelly.
Yes, Robert.
Yeah. Are you going to come up, Rob? No.
Closing, you want some closing remarks? No,
I feel good.
Okay, you're good.
Oh.
No, you're good. You're good.
Am I the only one who felt like I can listen to Julian talk like for hours?
Yes.
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 I was trying to remember everything you were saying. Thank you, Julian. And I want to thank you so much for the incredible talk. I feel like that we were like looking in on two old friends having a conversation just now. The future holds promises and dreams for the youth. However, may we all feel inspired to keep our consciousness, human rights, and care for our planet. I felt so inspired listening to you talk today. Now, I would like to give a special thank you to our event partners, UMEC and the Office of Alumni Relations, for bringing Julian to campus today. We would also like to thank Dr. Jim Carnell and the Carnell Family Dentistry for sponsoring the T-shirts in the back, so if you didn't get one, you can get one, for the first 200 attendees. Now, everyone is invited to form a line in front of the stage. I think we're starting somewhere over here, to have a copy of their Julian's book signed. And if you haven't purchased it, that table, okay, over there. And then Zach's shop is available if you would like to purchase a copy. If you don't have a copy, you want to purchase a copy. Thank you again. The book signing will conclude sharp at 6:30 p.m. Again, thank you. Thank you both.